Super Dodgeball. Thrash, bash, and smash the competition. And welcome to Nostalgia, a chronological exploration of every NES game released in North America. I'm Mike.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Joe.
Dodgeball. Quite possibly the most famous made-up sport. Am I right, guys?
What about it is made up?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like a legit sport. Like, nobody, this is one of those, the Ocho things all over again, where it's like, This is something that, like, started in gym class and is mostly a hazing experiment, but then just people love it so much if they're not the one being hit by the ball. And then you could just take out your frustrations on things. This doesn't have any qualifications of being like a real sport.
I don't know. I feel like that's a little closed-minded of you. I think like if it's got some rules and there's some physical activity involved,
and a ball.
And a ball. It's got a ball. That's a sport, you know?
Yeah, there you go.
All right, and I see what you're saying. It's like I think technically, yes, I would say it is definitely a sport. It has all the makings of a regular old sport. But yeah, just like culturally, we don't consider it among like baseball and soccer. So I'd say to that point, I think it's the most famous of those like secondary sports. Sure.
Well, thank you for not taking me so literally. I appreciate that. But no, it's just like one of those things, right? Everybody knows dodgeball, but you kind of stop playing it after 6th grade. I don't know. Did you guys ever get really into dodgeball and like start a team and do like a rec league or anything?
No, I mean, but we did play it through like high school, except we had to call it something else because the kids were getting bullied and you can't play dodgeball. So, but I mean, yeah, I never decided to continue to play it when I didn't need to.
Yeah, I think actually we have like we would never join like a rec league, but I remember times where we would go to just like a local place and rent out the gym and play dodgeball with a bunch of people, like kind of random times, but it definitely happened more than once.
Now, was it
an adult.
Did you have a group of players that surrounded the outskirts of the opposing team? And then 3 of you were on one side of the ball, or was it all of you were on one side of the ball?
That's exactly what I was going to say, Sean, because, I mean, there's dodgeball, the game where, like, you get hit and you're immediately, eliminated if you get hit if you haven't caught the ball. And then there's this dodgeball,
Super
which
dodgeball.
you have players on the outside of the arena that you can pass, the outside of the court, inside the arena, that you can pass the ball to, that can then also attack players on the same side of the court of an opposite team. An interesting, extra element here, but I don't think this is the dodgeball that most of us grew up with. Certainly not the one where you just continue to pummel people with the ball
until can't
their
take
life
it anymore.
Meter, until they're just like, I'm out. Like, my health meter is no more. I can't do this. I don't even know why I came today. I'm going home.
Well, actually, I think the little visual representation of this game suggests that they die, right? They turn into a little angel and fly up to heaven.
They had a good run.
Yeah.
Which is okay until, when you make it to the next round, your angels come back to life. So maybe that's part of the dodgeball gods. Like in Dragon Ball, if you collect the 7 Dragon Balls, you get a wish. Maybe you can use the dodgeball to make a wish after you beat your opponent to bring your other teammates back to life.
Yeah, I think that is in the league charter.
All right, so if we're not describing this well enough, just to get into the actual objective of Super Dodgeball versus what you might be familiar with in Dodgeball, the objective of each match is to defeat the rival team by throwing the dodgeball at the other members, the opponents. Each character has a life gauge that is gradually depleted. It's not. It depends on how many hit points they take by the kind of hit you throw at them. After their life gauge is depleted. They are out, but the other members still remain, and you have to remove every one of your opponents.
Is this Is this the first time? It sounds like you're reading something. This is the first time we've described the game, but it sounds like reading something. Or did you write this beforehand?
Well, I thought it was important to give. I did write this beforehand.
Okay.
I'm reading right off the show notes, but it's hard to. It
is hard to describe.
This is a new rule book for a sport. It's not like you would never describe Super Mario Brothers with rules.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But this because it's not. But this has actual rules to understand, and the court is just it's a free roaming square which you can only stay on your end of. There's just a lot of nuance here.
Yeah.
Obviously, we always link the long plays in the show notes, so I would watch one of those if it's still not if you're still not quite getting it. But I think everybody we can move on and just talk about the gameplay.
It's like hyper hockey, which has 3 pucks, and it's actually played on concrete, and everybody has a gun with 1 bullet in it.
What?
It's just that. That's what this version of dodgeball is like to actual dodgeball.
I'll say I feel like the easiest way for me to kind of understand it is it's the way you imagine professional dodgeball with the line dividing it, team on each side. But when dodgeball, like ESPN
the movie.
the Ocho dodgeball, except the only thing I've never seen before is what we were just talking about with when somebody is out, they go to the other side and stand on the sidelines and can catch the ball, pass it, and even throw it at the opponents. That's the one difference.
Yes. There's no bringing people back.
Wait, but that's not when they're out, Joe. That's just part of your team. You assemble your squad, you put the people you want on the outside.
Oh, I thought okay.
Right.
So
I misunderstood.
Yeah, I thought Joe was talking about how in real dodgeball, you're out, but then you can come back in if you catch it. If somebody else on the team catches it.
But is that house rules?
I think that's regular rules.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's kind of like capture the flag. Everybody has different rules, but ultimately it's just get the flag from the guy's pocket.
Yeah, I think that there are tons of different... I mean, we used to... not to go on another tangent about the way we used to play this, but we used to play in gym class where anyone who was out, if someone on your team... There were dodgeballs and there were also footballs laying around the field. And if anyone on your team threw a football at the backboard to the basketball net and hit it, everybody on the other everybody who was out from your team got to come back in.
Oh wow!
I mean, clearly just a house rule.
Yeah, that's
also,
some golden
it's
snitch
very
shit
easy
right there.
Yeah, it's also very easy to hit the backboard now, but we used to think we were in 3rd grade, and it was if you hit the backboard, you were a superhero. Everyone was cheering and shit. Anyway, that's not in this game.
So to start this game, there's a bunch of different modes and a bunch of different difficulties, and this is all decided right at the beginning in the menu screen. And I just thought it was interesting that the menu lets you select both mode and difficulty at the same time. It's usually a little more step by step, separate screens and separate decisions. This was just the ultimate decision maker. I can just free wheel my way through the menu, and I know that sounds silly, but it was just efficient. A noticeable difference from anything we've ever seen on the NES yet. So more games should just let you control all the menus on one screen if you should wish to do so, because I hate when you make a few selections, then make one wrong selection, and there's no back, so you have to reset the game to make all the proper decisions again. This one, you get some time to think about.
Yeah, I didn't really think of that.
I just wanted to point out that this is, if Mike is happy with the menu, it's a good menu.
Yeah, it's no Sesame Street 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Then when once you get to, let's say, let's talk about the big mode here, the World Cup mode. That's the one that probably most people are going to jump to right away. That one, you select the team based on the country, and no matter which country you pick, every single member has individual stats. It's not just for the country itself. It's the team members. And, the objective to give them stats and names is a pretty cool thing, because you put a lot of thought into both the stats of where they should be positionally, because you get to, take out, I don't want, this guy has a lot of throwing power, so I don't want him on the outside. I want him on the inside. Or, this guy has a lot of health, so he should be part of my team that's taking the damage regularly. You could think of it like that. Or you could just like try out each team and stick with the defaults because they probably know better than most casual players on how to do this thing. I'm curious, Sean and Joe, what did you guys do for the teams? Did you actually think about this strategically with the stats and everything, or did you just take the default team?
Well, I was under the impression that during regular World Cup mode, you could only play as the United States.
I think I think that's true, but I'm just talking about in general, like when you select.
Oh, like your player lineup?
Yeah, your player lineup and stuff.
I went with the default. I feel like if they designed this game regularly, they would have at least made it like a moderately intuitive default setup. I know that like I think the Sam, or I forgot his actual name, like he's got some pretty useful moves, and he's sort of like the captain, or however you want to describe it. And I figure like, yeah, that's the kind of player that I would want to keep where he is, where the game put him. So I didn't really play around too much with the lineups.
I didn't, my first couple of rounds, I kept it at the default, but I did play around with it later. And I don't know if I'm just absolutely crazy or not, but did anybody else notice or feel like the players got tired after like a few rounds or something? Like I feel like their stats depleted after time, which I'm sure is not true and would be impressive if it was, but like that's what it felt like to me. And like by the time I was facing India, I think, which is like match 3 or 4, my starting lineup was like just not doing any damage. Then for the next match, I switched my starting lineup and made them, put them on the sidelines, and everyone was doing much better again. And then a couple matches later, I had to switch again. It could just be my imagination. Maybe I was just getting tired, and then the placebo effect of me switching made me better again. But I really felt like there was something to switching it. But I can't confirm that there actually is anything in the code that
I want to say that that's more like a reflection of the stats of the teams you're playing. Like maybe because they have there's a lot of variables that I don't even know what a lot of them do. But I guess it's possible that like catch frequency would make you feel like you're not throwing the ball hard enough because they're catching it more, or something along those lines.
Yeah, honestly, that might be it for sure too, and it might have just worked out that the next team worked better with my new lineup.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't find anything that suggests that they get tired or that you would need to change them. I was thinking until you mentioned that you were swapping out the players and noticing a difference that maybe you were just getting tired as it went along. But knowing that it changes a little bit, I would say that there is a noticeable progression, as you move on through the World Cup at any difficulty, right, of the stats of the players you're going against. So, the first level is designed kind of to be a cakewalk where they don't really throw the ball really all that smart, but also just like don't do much damage. But then the later guys have beefed up stats that are going to, hurt you if you're not playing smart. In terms of like the statistics Sean was referencing, and like it is strange that like things such as their haircuts can matter to the kind of playing style they have. I didn't take the time to learn all of that, and I trusted the game to just give me the default lineup that was like, this is what's best for you. But it's always nice to go the extra mile, right? We always appreciate that, to like have the extras. Even just naming them is a little more flavor than we're used to on the NES. So giving them names and having stats and being able to change the position of those players, not just saying like, oh, well, if you play as the US, they have really strong arms, whereas if you play with China, they have really good defense. I'm making this up. I'm not saying these are like representative of those nations, but the idea that like it's actually on an individual player basis, I feel like that can only improve the longevity of the game.
Oh yeah. And not even just that, but also like the fact that a lot of these courts have different, I guess I'm jumping ahead a bit, but like just in terms of like replayability, and even some of the courts have different like effects. So, like if you're playing against Iceland, the court's a little bit more slippery, or if you're playing against Kenya, the court's a little bit softer, and you have to pick up more speed if you're trying to run for longer. There's a a lot of different things going on here that make each game feel a little bit different.
Yeah, it's a little bit like tennis in that regard, with the clay courts versus the grass courts and stuff. So, the attention to detail, both in the individual stats of the players, the courts, and even just like the main appeal of the gameplay for me was just the variety in your movement and throws. You can just throw the ball, you can pass it around, you can throw in the air. You can do a running throw, and you can do a running jump throw. And some of these will even lead to what is known as power throws. So it's not, even though it's just one button that throws the ball and one button that passes the ball, the movement intertwined with that creates a lot of like unique circumstances to happen. And the computer probably takes advantage of it better than I can because they understand the nuances of it. But it does feel good to be in control of what you want to do with so little buttons to press, whereas they could have made this a very complicated thing where you have to build up like a stat meter to then get a power throw, and then your next throw is automatically that power throw, like whether you like it or not. So I did appreciate that they decided to make movement in a game like dodgeball, where the whole idea is to run away from the ball or run to pick up the ball. Movement is such a large part of this game. I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting it to be more just about targeting. Yeah,
that's one of the main descriptors I would give this game, is that it is satisfying to play, and it's not that right off the bat how to pull off these super moves, and the super moves are like where the ball will either go super fast, or it'll split in three, or it'll take some weird trajectory and blink and be all energy looking. But over time, just as you're playing, you'll sort of get a rhythm for it and be like, oh, how'd I do that? And then you'll try to do it again, and maybe you'll fail. But then over time, you'll get that rhythm, and it just feels really good to once you master it, and now you're just wrecking shit.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things about this game is the fact that it feels so easy to learn. Compared to some other sports games, or especially those Olympic style games, this is easy to pick up, and it's simple in that sense. But it's still complex. You can still do a lot once you learn the controls, which you pick up really quickly. It feels intuitive, and I'd say it's complex but not complicated. It's not like you have to do all these weird button schemes. It's just you get the feel of it really fast, and then you can do a lot with that intuitive control scheme.
Yeah, that's a good thought, Joe, because there's no penalties that you can possibly incur. You're stuck to the confines of the buttons you have, and you can't move across the courts or anything. But this game is completely playable in a very boring scenario where, when you're first learning it, you just have the possession of the ball and you throw it. And there's no penalty for them catching it or anything like that. So it's just, okay, it didn't do any damage. It's perfectly serviceable to, learn how to play this game just through experimenting. No need to actually have the manual. And then, as you keep playing, you start to realize, when I, press twice on the D-pad, now I'm running, and my running throws seem to have a little more power to them, and now I'm actually seeing health points be taken away. I think it's interesting that this game can be played, maybe not properly, but can be played by anybody who barely even understands it just by pressing A and B, right? You'll just continuously pass it and then eventually lob it at somebody. But then it also rewards those who take the time to learn the system and can probably deal with the opponents much quicker.
Yeah, it's that classic description of sports, or I guess even esports games, where it's got a low skill floor and a high skill ceiling. I mean, not super high. There's not too much crazy shit you can do in this game, but that there is. You'll start to learn about intercepting the ball when they're trying to jump, when they're trying to throw it behind you, and or just blocking it and taking that one damage to make sure that something crazier doesn't happen. So yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
Yeah, and there's just not a control scheme to have to memorize a bunch of things too. It's I want to learn how to pull off this move where it's not like you have to hold this button and this button and that button. It's just intuitive. It's just do that. Like, you know how to move in that direction. You know how to throw faster. You know how to jump. Do whatever combination of those things you want and do whatever move you want. And yeah, like you said, Sean, it's not like there's like a ton of things you can do, but everything you can do, once you get those controls down, you could just figure out intuitively how to do it.
And this is going to piss off some fighting game fans, but the power throws could have been something like, ultimate moves in Street
like
Fighter
combo.
or something, where like, you have to input a certain amount of, fatalities in Mortal Kombat, where you have to like hit the certain amount of D-pad things in the right order, and then you'll execute these power throws that otherwise like noobs wouldn't know about. But instead, it just has to do with like timing. And even if you don't understand that or don't use the manual, there's a good chance like in any particular round of gameplay, you're just going to accidentally throw one, just because of how, like, even though it feels a little random, it does have to do with some kind of timing. It doesn't guarantee a hit. Like, you can like waste a power throw if you're not like intentionally throwing it at the right person. And I'm really surprised by how many different power throws there were. I think there was like 8 ground power throws and 8 different aerial power throws, which was just fun to see. I don't even think I saw them all, to be honest, but the ones I did see, it's like surprisingly cartoonish.
Oh yeah,
like how they work.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite was just the standard, like, throw it really fast and it doesn't stop when it hits somebody, so you can, if the computer's dumb enough to like just stack everyone, you basically knock everyone down with double digit HP.
Yeah.
So I would try my best to do that over and over, because then the guy behind him would catch it. So like, yeah, you could also like develop your own strategies of like the fastest way to dispatch these guys. I imagine on the higher difficulty, I didn't play above normal, but I imagine on the higher difficulty it's a little bit more difficult to do that. But yeah, there's a lot of playground to play around with different strategies.
And on the cartoonish note, it is a little surprising, and I'm not saying it would be for the best here. I actually think their show of restraint actually helped them a little bit, because this, the characters themselves are cartoonish and the designs of the stages are cartoonish. You would think that there would be like maybe some pitfalls or obstacles that might frequently appear to make the dodgeball match a little more like silly or something like that, given the way that the ball works and just like the characters in general. But they chose not to do something like that, and I think that's for the best, to be honest. But I just wanted to throw it out there. Do you guys think that some kind of stage hazards could have helped this game at all?
I
think
don't know.
It would make it a different game. I think it could be fun, but it's not what they set out to do, and I don't think it needs it by any means. Especially if you want to play this with like 2-player, right? Then I feel like you want just like the pure competition of it.
Yeah, I don't know about hazards, like Joe said, but like I was saying with Iceland and Kenya, if there were different variations that didn't give one team an unfair advantage, or maybe just like different, you could do it with the shape of the court, or you could also do it with like surface stuff. I'm sure there are other things that I can't think of and they didn't think of in this game. But you also don't want to go too far with that, and then it starts to feel gimmicky. But yeah, I don't think hazards was the way to go.
Keep in mind, Mario Tennis on the Nintendo 64, one of the all-time great sports games, did choose a balance of like being like, yeah, okay, you can play regular tennis whenever you want, but then they also made these fun stages that were more like, they weren't part of the championship modes or anything, but just something where now there's hazards that affect everybody, kind of like how Super Smash Brothers has now at least decided to, like, you could turn on or off the hazards based on how you want to play. You want to be competitive, do this, but if you also just want to, like, embrace the wackiness of where you're playing and the stages and stuff like that, there's Mount Fuji's in the background of one of the Japanese stage, and like you were saying about Kenya, I'm not sure what they could have done anyway with these things. The design choices alone are nice, right? The the Statue of Liberty for the United States. Like, it's nice just to have something.
Yeah, the music and the backgrounds are all cool. That adds to the variety of it. But yeah, I also don't know what else they could have done, but I'm sure someone more creative than us could think of something.
We're pretty creative. We came up with a bunch just now.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe they could have just done like, hey, you're in our hometown now, you play by our house rules, and there's just slight variations on the rules, right? Like that could be interesting. Like, okay, this rule now is, you don't get the sideline people for this match. Nobody does, or everyone gets an extra player for this match or whatever.
Yeah, because to be honest, I don't think the game's taking itself that seriously. Like, I know we're describing the rules very matter-of-factly and, like, saying, like, hey, if you want to play with a friend, this could be a competitive game. But I don't think the game actually set out to make, like, a new sport or to be so strict about how these things are, So,
well, the super moves sort of speak to that themselves.
Right. There is one thing in terms of gameplay that we haven't talked about yet, and, I think we've all said in our versions of dodgeball that we played in our own neighborhoods, when you catch the ball, the other player might be out, or you might be able to bring someone back in as a result of your catch. I guess it depends on, like, what kind of rules you're playing with. In this version of dodgeball, catching the ball doesn't cause a penalty for either side, but it is something that just happens a lot. Like, I thought catching the ball was a rather easy thing to both time, and if it wasn't a power throw, it was almost like inevitable to catch these balls. And this is where gameplay really, like, slowed down for me personally, where not that the computers were catching it a lot, they weren't on the easier difficulties, but I was just always ready, just at the speed that the balls are thrown, other than power throws, ready to catch these balls. And they weren't really taking much damage away from me, and it was just taking me a lot of time to whittle down their damage.
Yeah, I think that I think it could have helped with like making the window a little bit smaller, because I think, like, once you hit the catch button, your arms stay open for like a second or however many milliseconds, and if it hits you in that time, then you catch it. So I guess maybe if they made that a little stricter, it could have felt a little bit more challenging. But I also think that you sort of need that. Otherwise, this game is pretty simple. If every ball that's thrown ends up doing damage, I think it would be a bit more boring, because a lot of what you're doing in this game is trying to figure out, like, how am I going to sort of, I don't know, like, juke them out and make sure that they take damage. And that's what makes you need to do the power moves in some instances. Not always, but I would say it'll definitely help you out. So yeah, I agree.
I definitely noticed that the catching window was way too big of a window, both for my side and their side. I thought that they caught the ball a lot, even on, like, normal difficulty. But yeah, I do think it needs something like that, something to make that more complicated, so you're not just hitting every throw. But I feel like it would have been interesting if right now it's almost like easier and more intuitive. Maybe it's just the way I played, to catch the ball rather than to dodge the ball. I mean, there is a dodge button. I don't know if we mentioned it yet. And I feel like in real dodgeball, catching the ball, the reason you get a reward is because it's a little harder than dodging the ball, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, I feel like maybe making dodging like the more intuitive primary form of getting away, and then catching the ball. I know that there's right now in this game, there's no penalty or reward for doing it, but it feels like maybe there should be, because, like, in real dodgeball, catching the ball presents more of a risk, right? Because you might, if you don't catch it, you're hit because you haven't dodged. But so, like, if they could maybe add, like, that to balance it out, like, give you an incentive to try and catch the ball, but make it harder and make it more likely you're going to fail and get hit.
I think the incentive is already there, but I still agree that it should be harder, because if you just try to dodge the ball, then it's going to make it to their backcourt players, and they're going to keep possession in one way or the other. But yeah, you have to balance that out with making catching harder.
Yeah, I think that's overall, like, my biggest complaint with just the game in general with my time with it was that the matches, not that they were terribly long or anything, but that they felt like they could have had a little more energy and speed to them, even just with the ball. Like, the ball isn't necessarily floaty enough where it actually feels like it's up for grabs. There are very few moments where, like, it does come up to the line and you're able to steal it back, and that's a very exciting thing. Would have liked to see more of that, where, like, you can potentially hit a player so hard that the ball might come back to you if another one of your players doesn't, like, rush to grab the ball. Like you were talking about, Sean, one of the great things that the game did design is that if you duck, there is a good chance it's going to go to the players on the players from your own team that are on the opposite side, and that's a good thing because that penalizes ducking. But otherwise, there's really not much opportunity for them to be on that other side. I would have liked to have seen more potential steals and stuff like that, because it is in there. There are ways to intercept the ball. There's a way to block passes.
Yeah.
It just didn't happen all that frequently.
Yeah, the mechanics are there. It's just the way the game flows doesn't allow that event to occur too often.
One other thing I did like, though, is when you're running away from the ball, it does not let you immediately turn around. And it definitely doesn't let you, like, then catch it. So if you are running away from this ball, realistically, getting hit from behind hurts more, too, because you're not anticipating it. So it also does more damage. I like those kinds of decisions, and it does soften the blow of the catch being such a wide open window, because there are moments where, whether you're prepared to catch it or not, the game won't let you.
Yeah, that would open a lot of opportunities to just cheese this game more so, even though it's not really that difficult of a game. So that would suck.
Yeah. Can we talk about the difficulty a little bit, like the overall difficulty? Because I'm curious as to what you guys thought, but I did think that, at least on normal, after a while, I did get a little, like, fatigued of it, just because I felt like I had found a good pattern, and I'm just going to stick to it, and it's not going to fail me, I don't know if you guys felt the same way. Even on hard mode, I felt like it was definitely harder, but if I just kept sticking to that pattern, it just took way longer for the matches to end. I don't know. I felt like there could have been a little more challenge once you really got the hang of it.
Yeah, I felt similarly. I also have played a version of this game before. I guess I'm skipping a little bit to, like, the sequels and spin-offs, but there was a Game Boy Advance remake, and it was the first game I ever owned on Game Boy Advance. I didn't know that it was based on an NES game then. And it pretty much plays exactly the same. So I already kind of had some latent strategy, like, deep in the recesses of my Game Boy Advance brain. So it was pretty easy from the get-go for me. But that doesn't, for me, that didn't make it less fun. But I do, there was less challenge. So in terms of that, it was a little bit less engaging than if I came in fresh.
Joe, I think that's a good point to bring up the difficulty, because the courts change and the teams, you face country to country, and, like, the stats maybe are, like, chosen to be, like, the later countries in the World Cup mode have overall better stats or something. I can't confirm or deny that, but in terms of feeling the progression, that is strictly just tied to the difficulty. And since the overall teams don't necessarily feel that different other than their stats, once you move into the next, like, let's say you start easy, right, and you realize this is a cakewalk, I need to move it up to normal. Normal might be hard for, like, a little bit of time, and then once you figure out, like you were talking about, cheesing it, or just being open to slowing down the flow of the game and waiting to catch those balls, and then doing the same, like, running throws to do a little more damage than your usual throws. Once you, like, learn that stuff, then it's time to move on to the next one. You're not going to actually feel, in my opinion, any terms of actual difficulty progression throughout the mode itself, just between the three difficulties that you have to choose from. That's the only part of progression I felt.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I really wish would be the case would, there's so much nuance in the team layouts, right? Like each, playing against India felt very different than playing against the Soviet Union, like, because they just had different layouts of statistics on their different players. And I wish that somehow in the game design, like, that was enough to make me have to rethink my strategy for this. Oh, how do I do it for this, like, really heavy attacking team? And how do I do it for this, like, really fast defensive team? But really, it was just like, and maybe I could put more thought into it, but for me, really, it was like, well, I'm doing the same thing. It looks like it's affecting them slightly differently, but what I've been doing the whole time still seems like my best bet, so I'm not going to change the way I'm playing. Right?
Yeah, right. For the veteran who's played the game, like, since 1989 and is still playing it today, who knows all of the various teams' stats, he can then go in and select his lineup based on each team and only make the game even easier for him. Whereas, like, a casual player can still have a fighting chance against these teams. It just might take more time or, more learning to actually achieve that.
Yeah, there's, like, I think Team Russia has, like, the most obvious like, defining trait, because I think they have the most health among them. And then there's another team that I realized was intercepting the ball more often when I was utilizing, like, the backcourt players more. But other than that, like, I could pretty much use the same strategy for all of them, and I also think that would be ideal if it actually meant that you had to retool, and that it wasn't just like, oh, I could make this even easier, or and more so like, maybe I could make this less hard if I changed my strategy.
And, there's a whole nother mode that we have to talk about, which is the beanball mode. Forget all the rules we were talking about. This one is the recess version of, like, it's much more freestyle. There are no teams. Hit anyone you like. Everyone's after you. It's a last man standing dodgeball match in an open space where there is no court. And yet, when you lose all the rules, I thought that it was also less fun to play. And I know that goes against, like, the idea that, well, they just created this game anyway. Like, this isn't necessarily how you play dodgeball. But at least, like, when there are rules, there's also strategy. In this one, my strategy was just avoid the ball and the people altogether. Let them whittle down each other's health. And I'll show up when it's time.
Yeah, that's very conservative of you, Mike. No, I mean, it was pretty... I didn't like it either because of all that. Now all you've got are just, like, the base movement mechanics and no context to them aside from just hit whoever. So I lost interest pretty quickly.
Yeah, this is, even though this is like a kind of a form of dodgeball that I feel like I played just a lot as a kid with my friends, it didn't translate here to being very fun in this video game form, because it just felt like kind of a mess. And I think part of that is because, like, they made these 7 different teams that all looked like distinctly like they have different colored jerseys on, they have different haircuts and stuff. But why don't we have, like, one of each of those teams so I can see the difference between people? They're all just guys in green shirts with slightly different brown haircuts. Like, I can't even tell who I am except for the tiny little blinking one above my head. So, like, that made it, like, really just a cluster. And I found myself doing the same thing you did, Mike, just to get away from, just to be able to keep track of myself. I would get out of the cluster of everyone, stand away from everyone, and then they would kill each other, and then I would come in when there were fewer people left so I could keep better track of who's who. And, like, it's nice that, you have, like, oh, I can tell the difference between Sam and Mike because Sam has a widow's peak and Mike doesn't. But it's like, I'm never going to be able to notice that in the middle of gameplay. Like, give me a different color shirt or something.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising that this mode's even in here. Like, it, a freestyle thing. Like, I'm not saying don't include it, but I don't know. Maybe it should have been, like, a little more chaotic. Maybe there should have been, like, I don't know, more balls per depending on how many players are remaining or something. So this way, who knows if that's even possible. But, like, just things to increase the insanity, right? The idea that there is just all these guys out to kill each other, but most of them are actually just patiently waiting to see if they'll even interact with the ball or the person who's in possession of the ball. Running away was only something I thought about halfway into it, where I was like, well, I'm not even really getting into it. Like, nobody's really throwing it at me anyway. and I risk damage, so why not just like chill out and wait till we see where people stand? That's, again, to go back to Smash Brothers, something that you see players do in like 8-player matches where like the 8th guy will just kind of hang out on a large stage in a separate area, and then all of a sudden people will notice, but they're other players, so they're like humans with thought saying like, hey, wait a minute, that guy's getting away with this. Computers aren't necessarily like the best at that. They're just looking at who's closest to them and throwing the ball at them.
Yeah. I mean, maybe this would go against like the soul of dodgeball, but like maybe for this game, for this mode, it would have been best if they gave you, instead of like getting hit and you're out, maybe it was like the more points, the more people you hit, you get a point for every person you hit or something. And then you have incentive to put yourself in danger to try and get the ball, try and hit people, rather than just wait until you're the last one standing.
I like that. That would have made it a bit more interesting.
All right, on the sequels and spin-off side, Sean did mention the Game Boy Advance version of Super Dodgeball. There's a lot of, like, you got to remember, if it wasn't clear by the character sprites, this is part of that whole, like, Kunio-kun series in Japan, which they don't want people to know that in North America for whatever reason. I still don't understand that. Like, the character sprites all look the same. These are the same guys from River City Ransom. Like, that's a neat thing. Like, just, the same guys from Renegade. Like, just do it. Like, embrace that and have it be like one of the first video game universes. But instead, in the States, it's just its own separate thing. Not part of those beat 'em up games and Double Dragon and all that. Anyway, there was a Super Dodgeball for the arcade. To be honest, though, if you look at the arcade version of Super Dodgeball and you look at the NES version of Super Dodgeball, this might be one of the like closest cases we have of like the pixel art matching each other. Yes, the arcade version is noticeably maybe a little more higher fidelity, but the overall like difference isn't there compared to usual arcade games. I mean, last week we had Strider, and that was a very beautiful looking game compared to the NES one. Super Dodgeball also came out for the Neo Geo. It came out for the DS as Super Dodgeball Brawlers. There was apparently another thing, Crash and the Boys Street Challenge.
Crash and the Boys.
Crash and the Boys, like N, like the letter N. Crash and the Boys, which we will be playing on the NES. Let's see, this is a 1992 sports game, so it's going to take some time. But the game featured Olympic-style contests without rules or regulations between five
very
teams.
Olympic.
So it's basically it's their version of track and field.
Okay.
Yeah. And River City Soccer Hooligans also for the Nintendo DS. So Super Dodgeball, get that Game Boy Advance version because that's probably the Super Dodgeball Advance is probably the best you've got in terms of like actual successors. The games I listed off are just more like Kunio-kun games that North America chooses not to embrace. Technos Japan, I don't get it, guys. But this was before the whole like everything is a universe, right? Like that's a more recent movement. So maybe they thought like it actually was better. Like, there's a risk here if they don't like Renegade.
We don't want to associate it with
River
that.
City. Right. We don't want to associate it with River City Ransom. Now we have a second chance.
Yeah, or maybe they'll be like, oh, I already played River City Ransom, so do I really need to play Dodgeball? It's probably the same.
yeah. Mostly the same game, right?
Yeah.
They did name them differently, Joe. They're not all just called Kunio-kun. Anyway, that's really it for the sequels and spinoffs. I do need to mention that I posted on the Twitter earlier this week a advertisement for Super Dodgeball that teased a game in like the lower left-hand corner, teased a game called Super Sushi Pinball.
What?
Which sounds amazing. Tragically, never came out. It was stuck in development hell. CSG ImageSoft allegedly spent nearly $1 million developing Super Sushi Pinball, and they even had their marketing tagline, "Finally, a game that tastes as good as it plays." But Yes, it was canceled. I think they even showed it to Nintendo.
Wow.
But it was all canceled. It's never too late though.
I want to live in that timeline where it actually came out.
Super Sushi Pinball has a chance now to get like a cult following and people being like, we want it. And who knows, maybe at E3 2033, like we'll finally get the Super Sushi Pinball.
It starts with us. I want someone that's listening to this podcast to start a change.org petition to get this game back into development.
This is what you're going to use your one change.org request on. Everybody podcast
gets one.
Yes. One request.
That's my request.
To have someone start a change.org.
That's how important it is to me.
I would argue the only thing more important could be that fourth Donkey Kong game that never came out. That we were talking about in the other list of canceled games. But Super Sushi Pinball, I'll keeping that in. Super Sushi Pinball is just like, for me, a highlight that has nothing to do with Super Dodgeball. I don't even think maybe they're made by the same people, but like they're definitely not related. Would you even like forget about how cool the name is? Would you be interested in playing Super Sushi Pinball?
I mean, if it was, it's really more just like the history of it now. Like if this is a game that made like a company go bankrupt or something, then I need to play it.
I'm not a pinball guy personally, but I love sushi, so maybe this would be my entry point to pinball.
I'm just picturing, like, remember Nintendo made their own pinball game that was part of the original 1985 run, and that was a pretty bare bones game, and I'm just picturing, like, the same thing, and now, like, the bumpers are nigiri rolls, and, like, you know, it's just, like just the most uninspired stuff you could think of, and meanwhile, they're spending $1 million developing it. They're, like, going all in on the art style. Anyway, something that we are building but did not cost us $1 million is a little thing that we call the Essential Games List, and that's something that we're going to do right now. Sean, I feel like I haven't had you go first in a while.
You haven't.
And since, we're on our, we did the first 200 episodes, and you were rarely ever first, maybe now we'll switch it all up, and you'll be first more regularly.
Maybe.
So go ahead.
Okay. Super Dodgeball is one of those games that I like. It didn't feel like I was playing an old NES game, aside from some of the sprite flickering that was kind of annoying. And it was something that I genuinely had fun with. I didn't want to put the game down. There's a lot of games that we review here that I just can't wait to put down because I have to play them. This was not one of them. There are a lot of faults in terms of difficulty, but I think that it's just a satisfying enough experience that I can look past that. Not saying that anyone else will, and I know that there is there are a couple more recent versions of this game, but this seems the purest. So I'm gonna extend a vote for Super Dodgeball to be placed in the Essential Games list.
Very cool. That is one vote for Super Dodgeball. I will chime in, and I will say that, the game had overall a very pleasing rulebook and a new sport, a nice take on a new sport. It's fun to see, like, when when you're not just playing basketball and it's just basketball again or something like that. This was a fresh new take on a familiar gym game, but the pacing of the game itself and the way that the computers played against me, I'd argue that this is actually just a game best played with another person, probably, where two people who really like this game probably go up against each other. It's not that the computers are poorly programmed either. It's just that it felt more like I was just waiting. I was in the waiting process whenever they had the ball. I was just, anticipating what they were going to do. I was going to, either catch the ball or, maybe they were going to do a power throw and I'd be hit by it or something like that. It just felt like it was slowing down the play when I was playing against the computer rather than another person. For that reason, since that's such a big chunk of the game, and because I don't feel that Beanball really adds anything, I'm going to say that this is not an essential game. But that doesn't mean it's over. There is a chance for Super Dodgeball on the essential games list, and it comes down to Joe.
Well, it's funny because between the two of you, you've sort of both said like one half of what I wanted to say. So for one, I will say, yeah, I think as far as like a sports game on the NES, this is top tier from what we've played so far. I think that it just plays so intuitively, and it's just fun. It almost calls back all the way back to episode 4 when we were talking about Duck Hunt, where that's like it's just a skill based thing, and it feels like just something you do. You don't have to worry. You don't feel like you're just playing a video game where you have to remember the controls or anything like that. And that makes it really fun. And I did have a blast playing this game. I'll say that my flaw that I talked about a lot during the episode is that it does start to feel a little simple to win after a while. Like after a while, I was still having a good time, but it felt like it wasn't pushing me enough to like feel like I'm that satisfaction of winning. It just felt like if I'm always, for me personally, it was just kind of alternating between like a running shot and then if they were close enough to me, a running jumping shot, and like it almost felt like I just even when I missed, I so rarely got hit because it's so easy to catch the ball that it never felt like enough of a challenge. Now, the other thing that factors into it for me is I do think that like there's a good chance I would vote this essential if I had played 2-player. I haven't played 2-player, so I can't say for sure. But, I think 2-player is where a lot of the value could come from in this game. But right now, having played against the computer, it's just shy of it for me. So I'm going to say no. And it does make me kind of sad because I do sort of want to see this on there, but I just don't know if I fully believe it that it goes on there. But I'll say this, Sean.
Yes.
At the at the best of 89, bring this back up, and I'll have tried to play 2-player, and maybe I'll have changed my mind by then. But for now, I can't put it on.
All games are up for the running in the best of 1989, and you'll have to just replay all of them. You'll have to listen to every episode, replay every game. It's never too late for Street Cop. Am I right?
Right, exactly, yes. And we can play this 2-player and decide based on that and whether or not Zelda 2 went on if this will go on.
Oh, okay. So it's a quid pro quo.
I'm just saying that. I'm just thinking out loud of like what
I don't know. It certainly sounded like that. Anyway, this has been another episode of Nostalgia. If you're looking for more nostalgia, don't worry. We have a Twitter page at NostalgiaCast where we post stuff all week. If you're looking for more than that, you're like, hey, I want more episodes, and you already listened to 201 plus episodes, don't worry. Next Friday, there's another new episode where we will be playing Thundercade, which sounds pretty intense. Thundercade. It's an arcade during a storm.
No. Okay.
What do you got? What do you think?
I mean, I think it's a motorcade of things that are loud.
Okay, great. Joe, what do you think Thundercade is?
I think you guys are mishearing it as Thundercade. I think it's
Thundercade.
It's like a Kool-Aid knockoff with the guy whose last name is Thunderk. Thundercade.
Oh, Thundercade.
Like yes. One of those songs from the 80s where they're like it's a song for a certain charity. Like Live Aid.
Oh yeah.
Oh, right. There you go. Absolutely. Who could forget the great thunderstorm that then required the greatest rock concert of all time? Anyway, we have that, but we also have, new. We have our own Patreon. Patreon.com/nostalgia. You can join.
Money.
Yeah, well, that's true, Sean. But also, it's not just giving money because you also get things in return. For $5 and up patrons, they get an episode of Nostalgia Bites. Our very first episode, as a matter of fact, is coming up soon. It is the game Nuts and Milk. And you're like, wait a minute. I don't want nuts and milk in my cereal, but I do want that as an episode. But I don't know what the heck you're talking about, Mike. Don't worry. We'll explain it on the podcast. But Nuts and Milk never came out for the NES. See, it's a Famicom exclusive. And that's the whole idea behind Nostalgia Bites. They're bite-sized episodes where we play Famicom games that you can play no Japanese required. Sean, isn't that just a miracle?
I mean, I'm still not convinced that you didn't make that title up.
Yeah, I'll say that if you think you can find 3 or 4 people having a long conversation about nuts and milk anywhere in any context, whether it's the game or not, go for it.
Yeah.
But if not, maybe this is the place to go.
Yeah, maybe for just $5 a month, that dream can be fulfilled.
Money.
And until then, we'll see you guys next Friday for Thundercade.